CountryWide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lampp.
But right now, and I can see her waiting on the line for me, Vanessa Winning is the Director of On-Farm Support from MPI. They have found some interesting work that they've been doing when it comes to the, I suppose, the adverse events. Floods, droughts, storms, biosecurity shocks are becoming a more regular part of farming life, unfortunately. MPI has expanded its on-farm support as an adverse events place, and they're doing more and more work on that. Vanessa Winning, Director of On-Farm Support for MPI, Minister of Primary Industries. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for your time. Appreciate having you on the show. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Nice to be on a new show and seeing how you're doing, Andy.
Thanks very much, Vanessa. Yeah, lovely to have you on the show. Yes, it's a fascinating project, actually, and we're really enjoying it. This is coming to the end of our fourth week, so 2 hours a day, obviously, from 11 till 1. A new dawn in rural broadcasting, actually, and we're embracing it. It's hard work, don't get me wrong, it's hard work, but really, really enjoying it. It was really cool to do our first outside broadcast this week actually, up at the Ag Innovation Conference in Palmerston North. And I saw some of your wonderful people there. And next week we're going to be in Wellington. Hopefully we can catch up in person at the Climate Change Conference in Wellington next week. So really looking forward to that.
Right, yeah, 2 days, 29th and 30th. Should be really interesting speakers, so it should be quite a good conference to go to.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Let's talk now about your role, Director of On-Farm Support for MPI. What has changed with the way that your unit or your organisation is being activated more and more nowadays?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's necessarily changed from what, in terms of what they were hoping it would achieve at the beginning. But I guess the biggest thing that's probably changed is other people's attitudes towards it. Like we are definitely, as you build relationships and trusts, and that takes a bit of time. What we're finding is we're finding niches. We're finding places where levy organisations or other extension activity isn't quite in the same spot, and so we're finding places where we're getting called in, where there's demand for our services, and where we can collaborate a bit better and join up a bit more. So it takes time, and I'm really proud of where we've got to in essentially 3 years, because the first director, Dr. John Roach, started at the beginning of 2023. So we've been going just over 3 years. And we're finding now demand is outstripping supply. It's
interesting because when On-Farm Supports first started under Dr. John Roach, and I've spoken to John myself about this, and he sort of indicated that, there was some concern, negativity, misunderstanding about what on-farm support role was when it first started. And he was pretty upfront. He said to me, actually, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, John, if I ever get this wrong, but something along the lines of, well, we weren't quite sure what we were building either, but we got into it and it's developed into this role. Is that, Vanessa, now you've taken over, are you seeing those concerns being mitigated, dissipate? Is there more of an understanding about what you guys are doing?
100%. Yeah, you're always still going to get, people on the sidelines making comment, and potentially those are people who don't engage with us on a regular basis. But that's across any kind of activity. So, I would suggest there's the same kind of concern about what the levy bodies are doing, or, other organisations in this space. So I think we've definitely grown up and we've built that trust and we're building those relationships. And I think what we're seeing is a lot more collaboration. So, we do a lot of work with Beef and Lamb and Dairy NZ and FAR, and we're trying to find those places which are not necessarily their areas of focus, but can be areas that farmers and growers desperately need some support in. And you would have seen the Farmers Weekly article this week. What we're trying to do is demonstrate, that agnostic kind of activity. So, we're not beholden to any type of farming, but what we can do is, smooth some of those conversations and help find the right people. And, what we've been finding, and you'll probably talk to Joe about this when you do talk to Joe Finer, is that we end up doing quite a few referrals to consultants, rather than we're not competing with them. And I think right at the beginning there was a lot of fear about that competition and what everyone's role was going to be. But to be honest, there aren't enough of us across all of the groups, rather than there's too many. And that, farming and growing is complicated, and it's getting more complicated. And there's, in terms of advisory, you want trusted advisors and people who know what they're talking about and can also connect you with, the technical experts when we can't do it. So, in my view, the whole idea is we get more. And so one of the things that we've been doing in that space is focusing in on some scholarships. So for 3 years, we've been running this Science with Farmers scholarship program. And every year we bring in 6 new scholars. They get $5,000 to go towards their tuition. And the whole idea around that is to, add to the consultancy rather than, competing with each other. And, we have it in other sectors. We have a lot of finance and other types of advisory. So we're just, getting a bit more professionalism around it and supporting each other.
That's interesting. So those consultants that you bring in as scholarships, effectively, they then go out into the private sector effectively.
100%. What we're seeing is, a lot of them are going into extension activity or independent consultancy. And so it's working with rather than, working against and trying to find those holes. And, your comment about response, we are having a lot of weather events. And so that's another little niche that we can fill. In terms of response, there's a response team and MPI more generally that manage the kind of the national kind of activity. And then what happens is our teams, they get into local CDM calls or into the rural advisory groups, support those, really help support and bring together the right people. And then we end up helping with response recovery activity. So getting feed out to the right places, helping get fencing people in the right places, just finding those spots where there isn't just a natural home for the other parts of industry to play.
So have you been formalised? I mean, you are government, and normally in a major emergency there's a whole of government response, right? But are you formally into the CDM emergency management ecosystem?
Yeah, MPI is, yeah, absolutely. And so we have responsibility for animals and also for productive land. So, and productive land across the country is getting more and more affected by the weather activity. But at the same time, we also spend a lot of time on resilience building. So we have programs that help farmers get ready for responses, as well as help them get back on their feet. And the more that we can do that, the less impact we have on the other end. So, trying to be that ambulance at the top of the cliff rather than at the bottom.
Exactly. What about federated farmers? What's the relationship between you guys there on farm support and federated farmers? How does that work?
Yeah, it's really good in the regions. And I think, they don't really do extension activity, federated farmers. So generally speaking, like in Northland with Colin, for example, he'll pull us into conversations and if someone reaches out to them and they need some help, then they'll ring us up and get us to go out there and have a conversation. So again, it's dependent on the relationships in each region, but it's getting really strong. And I think, they, as I say, they don't do extension activity, so we're not competing with feds in any way at all. So I think what's happening is people are getting less fear around what we do and actually seeing the benefits that we can provide. And you saw some of the team this week. Most of them are farmers or growers themselves or have been in the sector for a while. They're not government people. They very much are, people from those regions have real empathy for farmers and growers in the regions that they're working with. And they know the regional activity and they know those nuances, which means they come with trusted relationships and they continue to build them. So, it's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but it's going really well. And, I think that, as I said to Richard Rennie at Farmers Weekly, demand is now outstripping supply. We are having to really work together to make sure that we can meet the needs of our farmers and growers.
I was just going to ask you about that and that on-farm relationship, because when on-farm support first started, there was concern from farmers and growers, particularly farmers, about the, I suppose, perceived reputation of MPI, and no farmer in particular really wanted to voluntarily invite MPI onto their farm because they were seen as, rightly or wrongly, the policeman, the policewoman, right? And a lot of people said to me, well, there's no way on God's earth that I'm going to be using those guys because I'm not having them on my farm because they could show up. They're duty bound to report something, even if it's taken out of context or whatever. Based on what you've just told me, is that scenario, that kind of feeling, is that dissipating?
Very much so. So we only go on farm when we're invited to go on farm, and what we have found is, an increase in the number of farmers or growers ringing in to ask us for support, or talking to our local team, engaging with them at events, coming along to activities that we're running. And, what we are seeing is that idea of being the regulator has absolutely dissipated. And I think, that takes time. And it does mean that the team, have to walk that path slowly in some cases. And there will always be those. And, there was someone in that article, I believe, that said that, that it can be difficult having what they believe is the regulator in the room. That's okay. There's 50,000 farmers and growers in New Zealand, plus, all of the extra staff, etc. We do not have enough team members to manage 50,000. So we'll go where we're asked to go. We will support where we need to support. And there will always be those, and, this is human nature, that won't embrace us. But hopefully they've got others that they can embrace and get their support and help from other parts of the ecosystem, and that's okay. Like, we are here to support those that really do want and need us to be in their camp.
All right, Vanessa. Hey, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on the show today and having a bit of a yarn to us. Great to see you. Looking forward to catching up with you in person in Wellington next week, and then we can talk cricket, eh?
Yeah, wow. Oh, Bangladesh.
I know, don't even go there. I went to bed and thought, we've got this. Nope. So
nope. Well, disappointed, totally disappointed. We'll have that conversation next week.
All right, Vanessa
Winning,
Winning,
for having me.
Director on Farm Support.
CountryWide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lampp.